The sun hung low over the quiet suburban street, casting long shadows that stretched across cracked pavement and empty storefronts. It was the kind of late afternoon where the air felt heavy with tension, even though nothing seemed out of place. Cars hummed softly in the distance, their tires whispering over the asphalt, but the silence between the buildings felt deeper than the usual suburban quiet. On the corner near the abandoned convenience store, a small group of young men loitered, leaning against rusted metal poles and peeling paint, their laughter echoing off the walls in a way that suggested they were looking for trouble rather than conversation. Their eyes darted around, scanning the street like predators, sharp and calculating. They were tall, broad, each carrying the kind of confidence that only comes from fearlessness or recklessness, or a dangerous combination of both. Among them, the leader, a stocky man with a crooked grin and tattoos snaking down his forearms, cracked a knuckle and smirked, as if daring the world to challenge him. Then she appeared. At first, she seemed like any other passerby, a woman walking briskly, hands tucked into the pockets of her jacket, earbuds in, oblivious to the predatory eyes following her. But there was something in the way she moved, a quiet precision that made the air feel taut around her. Her steps were measured, controlled, almost surgical, yet effortless. She exuded a calm that contrasted sharply with the loud, reckless energy of the young men. They noticed her immediately, not because she looked threatening, but because there was a sense of authority in her posture that silently challenged theirs. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight braid, and the faint scar along her jaw hinted at a life far more complicated than the streets she walked now. The leader chuckled, nudging his friend. "Easy target," he whispered, loud enough for her to hear. "Looks like she won't put up much of a fight." She paused, removing one earbud and tilting her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. Not in fear, not in anger, but with a studied curiosity, like a chess player assessing her opponent's pieces before the first move. She didn't quicken her pace, didn't attempt to ignore them. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the tension settle around her like a tangible thing. The group smirked, thinking her hesitation was weakness. They stepped forward, forming a loose semicircle to block her path, their confidence swelling like a tide. "Hey, sweetheart," the leader called, his voice dripping with mockery. "Where do you think you're going all alone? You look lost. Need some help?" Her lips curved into a faint smile, almost imperceptible, but it carried the weight of an unspoken warning. "I think I can manage," she replied calmly, her voice smooth, unwavering. There was no fear in it, no hesitation. Just clarity, precision, and an undercurrent of power. That tiny phrase, casual and polite, seemed to ignite something in the air. The young men laughed, assuming it was a challenge. They stepped closer, their movements casual, like a storm rolling in, unpredictable and dangerous. The leader reached for her shoulder, intending to intimidate, perhaps even push her. That's when it happened, the subtle shift that changed everything. Her body tensed for a split second, and the energy around her changed as if someone had flipped a switch. Her eyes locked onto the leader, and in that moment, he felt the first ripple of unease. It wasn't just strength he sensed, it was skill, control, and an invisible force that spoke louder than any weapon. The kind of presence that could command obedience without a word, that could end a fight before it began. She moved with a fluidity that was both mesmerizing and terrifying, a graceful predator in human form. In one motion, almost too fast to follow, she sidestepped his reach, grasping his wrist and twisting it behind his back in a movement that was both precise and effortless. A sharp crack echoed, and the laughter died in the throats of the group. Shock and fear replaced the bravado they had flaunted moments before. She didn't stop there. Using their own momentum against them, she moved through the group like water flowing around rocks, redirecting, blocking, neutralizing. Each movement was calculated, deliberate, yet deceptively easy to follow. No punch was wasted, no kick unnecessary, every strike served a purpose. Within seconds, the group was disoriented, some scrambling to get away, others frozen, unable to comprehend how their confidence had evaporated so quickly. The leader tried to recover, to regain control, but she had already assessed him, every flaw, every imbalance, every hesitation. With a single sweep, she sent him sprawling onto the pavement, and the others scattered like leaves in a storm, their bravado shattered. When it was over, she stood alone in the middle of the cracked street, breathing evenly, her eyes scanning the empty corners, ensuring there was no lingering threat. The sound of distant traffic returned, normalcy seeping back into the street, but the echo of her presence lingered like a shadow. Passers-by who had witnessed the scene whispered, their voices low, almost reverent. They saw what the bullies hadn't, the raw, undeniable power of someone trained to survive, to fight, and to protect herself. No words were exchanged, she didn't need them. The lesson had been delivered clearly and decisively: underestimate her, and you pay the price. Then, with the same calm precision with which she had appeared, she turned and continued down the street, leaving the stunned onlookers behind, carrying with her the quiet authority of a force far greater than anything they had imagined. The evening air had grown cooler, carrying the faint scent of rain from the distant hills, mixing with the city's usual undertones of asphalt, exhaust, and faintly burned wood. Streetlights flickered on, casting pools of golden light across uneven sidewalks, while shadows clung stubbornly to corners, stretching and twisting with the gentle sway of trees. The woman walked with deliberate pace, her boots making soft, controlled clicks against the pavement, each step measured and purposeful. She didn't look back at the chaos she had left behind. The image of the fleeing bullies was already fading from her mind, replaced by the focus and clarity that only discipline can instill. Her body still hummed with the residual energy of the fight, a combination of adrenaline, awareness, and sheer physical mastery, but her mind was calm, precise, calculating the next steps with an almost military efficiency. As she turned a corner, the atmosphere shifted. The quiet hum of the city gave way to the low thrum of voices, laughter, and the occasional clatter of something heavy dropping in the alleyways behind closed doors. She didn't flinch. Years of rigorous training had taught her to read tension in subtle shifts, the tilt of a head, the placement of feet, the rhythm of breathing. Somewhere in the maze of buildings and shadows, trouble lingered. She could feel it before she saw it, a presence heavy with intent, reckless but dangerous. And she knew instinctively that ignoring it wasn't an option. Not because she sought confrontation, but because she could never let threats go unchecked. A narrow alley opened ahead, dimly lit by a single, swinging neon sign that buzzed intermittently. Two figures emerged from the darkness, blocking her path. They were younger, less disciplined than the bullies from earlier, but desperation and sheer arrogance can make up for lack of skill. One brandished a metal pipe, the other a jagged bottle. Their eyes widened the moment they recognized her, not with fear yet, but with confused caution, as if they sensed something beyond the ordinary in her stance, in the subtle coiling of her muscles beneath her jacket. "You again," one of them sneered, raising the pipe like it could do more than just make noise. "Thought you taught us a lesson earlier, huh? Maybe you're not so tough after all." Her lips curved in a faint, knowing smile, almost imperceptible, but it carried weight, the kind of quiet, contained confidence that can silence a room. "I don't think that's wise," she said evenly, her voice low and steady, carrying a calm that was anything but passive. She shifted her weight, the movement so subtle it could have been a casual adjustment, yet in that single motion, she became a storm barely contained. Her eyes, dark and sharp, locked onto theirs, reading intention, balance, and weakness with uncanny precision. She didn't raise her hands, didn't even flinch. The mere presence of her awareness made the attackers hesitate. The first instinctive lunge came from the one with the bottle, but she reacted before he could even fully commit, twisting her wrist to deflect, redirecting the swing harmlessly into the empty alley wall. The sound of glass shattering was sharp, a punctuation to the warning that had already been delivered. The pipe-wielding assailant charged, hoping that sheer size would overpower technique. It didn't. She sidestepped smoothly, her motion fluid and unbroken, and used his forward momentum to send him stumbling past her, crashing into the alley's trash bins. The metal clanged and rattled, and he scrambled to regain balance, realizing too late that every movement she made was precise, deliberate, impossible to counter with brute force alone. The woman's strikes weren't about display, they were about control, efficiency, and neutralization. Each twist, each turn, Each calculated application of force minimized risk to herself while maximizing control over the situation. Within moments, the pipe was out of his hands, clanging uselessly on the pavement as he hit the ground. The air felt charged now, the city around them fading into background noise. She didn't need to shout, the silence carried her authority. Her attackers, now wide-eyed with shock and disbelief, realized that they were outclassed not just physically, but mentally. The calculation of their every move had been anticipated, countered, and nullified without the slightest strain on her part. One of them tried to scramble backward, hoping to flee, but she moved with the effortless swiftness of a predator, blocking escape routes, cutting off angles, containing threat after threat until there was nowhere left to run. Every reaction was instinctive, honed from years of training, but it appeared natural, almost casual, a terrifying combination of grace and lethal precision. As the fight drew to a close, the alley was littered with broken glass, overturned trash cans, and the scattered remnants of arrogance. Her breath was steady, even, controlled, despite the physical exertion. She scanned the shadows one last time, ensuring no hidden threat remained. The attackers, bruised, humiliated, and terrified, staggered to their feet and fled into the city night, leaving behind a silence heavy with awe. Bystanders who had caught glimpses whispered in hushed tones, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Someone muttered, "She's stronger than anyone I've ever seen," while another shook their head, silent in stunned disbelief. She straightened, dusting off her jacket, her expression neutral, unreadable. There was no celebration, no arrogance, only the quiet awareness of someone who knew their own strength and the responsibility that came with it. Power, she understood, was not about intimidation or fear, it was about control, about the ability to act decisively when necessary. The world was full of people who underestimated her, and they would continue to do so, but that would always be their mistake, never hers. As she stepped out of the alley and back into the main street, the lights of the city reflected off her eyes, alert, focused, ready for whatever came next. Even in the midst of chaos, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had survived worse, endured more, and emerged stronger than any challenge the world could throw at her. And the night, alive with possibility and danger, seemed to bend around her, acknowledging in silence that she was a force not to be reckoned with, a presence stronger than 100 men combined, moving with purpose through a city that had no idea of the storm it had just witnessed. Night had fully fallen, draping the city in shadows, neon lights flickering against rain-slicked streets, painting the world in streaks of electric blue and orange. The woman moved with deliberate ease, her steps silent yet purposeful, boots kissing the wet pavement in a rhythm that matched her controlled heartbeat. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, cutting through the hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a stray dog, but it was just background noise to her trained senses. Her eyes swept constantly, scanning, calculating, anticipating. Danger had a way of following people like her, people with skill, people who could defend themselves, but that danger had never intimidated her. It merely sharpened her focus. A narrow street opened before her, lined with abandoned warehouses, their metal shutters closed tight, graffiti stretching like veins across their surfaces. She sensed movement before she heard it, a group of figures slipping from shadow to shadow, eyes gleaming, hands flexing around makeshift weapons. The bullies from earlier weren't here, but this new threat carried the same arrogance, the same foolish belief that strength could be measured by size and volume rather than precision and experience. Their leader, taller and broader than the rest, stepped forward, cracking his knuckles, his smirk cocky and insolent. "Thought you were untouchable, huh?" he jeered, voice rough and mocking. "Guess we'll see just how tough you really are." Her lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I don't think you want to find out," she said evenly, her tone calm but carrying a weight that immediately drew their attention. Not fear exactly, but awareness. In that single line, a warning echoed, "Underestimate me, and you will regret it." The taller man lunged first, throwing a wild punch aimed at her head. She didn't flinch, she had anticipated the movement the moment he squared his stance. With a swift step to the side, she caught his wrist mid-air, twisted it with precision, and redirected his force downward. He crashed to the ground with a thud that rattled the metal shutters behind him, groaning as he scrambled to rise. The others hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. They realized too late that brute strength was meaningless against someone who had trained her body to move like a weapon. Each of her movements was a calculated response, every block and strike perfectly placed to incapacitate without wasted energy. One rushed her from behind with a metal rod, but she pivoted, using his own momentum to throw him into the wall of a warehouse. The clatter of metal echoed through the empty street, punctuated by the low, sharp grunts of the men as they collided with the hard surfaces around them. A sudden surge of adrenaline rippled through her, though she remained outwardly calm. Years of Navy SEAL training had honed her not just physically but mentally. Every encounter was analyzed, every reaction controlled, every outcome predicted. She moved like water, slipping past attacks, countering with strikes so precise they seemed almost premeditated, yet fluid and instinctive. One by one, the men attempted to surround her, hoping sheer numbers would overwhelm, but she anticipated every angle. She ducked, dodged, and redirected, her strikes flowing like a deadly dance, leaving the would-be attackers disoriented, off balance, and defeated. The leader tried to rally them, shouting commands, gesturing, but the fear was unmistakable now. His eyes met hers, and in that instant, he saw something that froze him, a storm contained within a human frame, controlled yet overwhelmingly powerful. She didn't need to speak. Her presence alone conveyed authority, skill, and an unspoken warning: leave now, or face consequences far beyond your imagination. He made a desperate lunge, swinging a chain he had found on the ground, hoping to strike from a distance. She sidestepped effortlessly, catching the chain mid-air, pulling with precise force so the man lost his balance and fell face-first into a puddle of rainwater, gasping for breath. The others froze, their confidence evaporating completely as the realization sank in. She was stronger than they could comprehend, faster than they could react, and smarter than they could anticipate. One by one, they dropped their weapons, their bravado crushed beneath the weight of undeniable superiority. She didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She simply stood there, wet rain glistening on her braid, eyes scanning the silent street, confirming that the threat had ended. The defeated men scrambled away into the night, humiliated and terrified, disappearing into shadows as quickly as they had emerged. The city seemed to breathe again, the tension fading, replaced by a quiet reverence that seemed to linger in the air. Passers-by who had hidden behind walls or peeked from corners whispered among themselves, barely daring to speak too loudly. Did she just? One muttered, voice trembling. Another shook his head. I've never seen anything like that. She's stronger than 100 men. As she stepped forward, leaving the alley behind, a sudden realization settled over the few remaining witnesses. Strength isn't measured by intimidation, numbers, or size, it's measured by control, skill, and the courage to stand unwavering in the face of danger. And in that quiet, soaked night, they understood the truth: some forces in this world are unmatched, invisible until revealed in a single decisive moment. She carried herself with the serene confidence of someone who had faced far greater storms than this city could conjure, someone who had survived, thrived, and emerged stronger every time. The sound of distant traffic returned, punctuated by the occasional flash of headlights cutting through the darkness. She moved on, disappearing into the neon-lit streets, leaving behind a story that would be whispered for weeks, the tale of a woman who had walked alone into danger and emerged victorious, her strength surpassing that of 100 men combined. The city seemed smaller now, as if it had been reminded of the forces it underestimated, the silent guardians hidden in plain sight. Her journey continued, each step a testament to the power of discipline, skill, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you can do. By the time the night reached its peak, the streets were quiet once more, but the memory of her presence lingered, a shadow, a lesson, a force unbroken and unstoppable. No one would forget the night the bullies learned the hard way that strength is not measured by arrogance, and that sometimes, one person can outmatch 100.